People who have ended someone's life in self-defense, what's the thing that haunts you the most?
Experience 1. The first shot hit him high in the sternum at about 8 feet, the second at about 3 foot right into the heart. The smell of everything. You never hear about any of that. And I spent 3 hours trying to wash the blood off. Dude was on PCP, a day after doing 6 months for DV. He thought I was sleeping with his girlfriend because I was in her old apartment. She apparently had a restraining order on him. He had a pretty unhealthy knife on him and kept coming after the first shot. The coroner said the first shot killed him. It would have taken about a minute. I had to get a new apartment in the same complex because of all the bodily fluids and excrement in the bedroom. Scary part. A friend who had done a tour in Nam told me,
The first one is either the hardest one or the easiest one.
I almost didn't pull the trigger. Now, not a second thought. And that bothers me. Experience 2. The people close to him didn't believe he could be a bad man. Had to leave my hometown because I couldn't get a job or be left alone after doing a couple of years in prison for manslaughter. I didn't have $150,000 for lawyers. He was nice to everyone, but behind the closed doors was an entirely different person. Just a very few people knew. Abused my mom and me mentally and physically for my entire childhood until one day he actually tried to kill us, but I got him first. I don't know why that day he lost it worse than at any other time, and I wonder every day why. And now I developed a bunch of mental and physical health problems. Experience 3. As a combat veteran at 19 years old, I had no problem pulling the trigger on guys that were shooting at us. Now, as a father of a young boy, I find myself thinking about the fact that sometimes long before this person was in my crosshairs, he was someone's little boy who was raised by a mom who loved him, and I ended that life journey, and it makes me sad, and I think it always will. Experience 4. The way his body crumpled, and the gurgling sounds he made. I had been stabbed, managed to get the knife from him, and stabbed him with it. Being that close and having the feeling of the knife in my hand piercing his flesh made it so much worse. Feels like stabbing an orange. A tiny bit of resistance, then just sliding in. I would have rather had a gun. For anyone wondering, I was being jumped by him and 3 others. I guess he got carried away in the violence and stabbed me. The others ran away when I stabbed him. They were charged in his death. Experience 5. While visiting my aunt and sick uncle on their farm for the weekend to help put up a security gate in their house due to the increase in crime in their neighborhood, I shot a guy trying to break down the newly installed security gate around 3 a.m. I was woken up by my aunt and niece saying they heard a noise by the back door and couldn't get my uncle out of bed, asked me to go and look. Sure enough, someone was trying to break the gate open. We shouted that there were people in here and to go away. He had the audacity to shout back that he knows and he's still coming in. My aunt ran to fetch my uncle's revolver and wanted to shoot through the door. She was panicking and shaking, so I took the gun from her. Having shot it hundreds of times before, it felt like target practice. I shot 2 warning shots through the door but at the feet. Both shots landed, one on his foot causing him to fall down, and the second shot hitting him in the thigh. Bleeding badly. He ran off and left a trail of blood. The body was found the next day by a neighbor hidden in his shed. What haunts me is the innocence of it all. I could have shot to kill, but I chose not to. It killed him anyway. Cops never questioned me once. Experience 6. I was slowing down my truck with my 3 kids in the back seat at a red light. There was an older car in front of me. A man in the car got out like he was pissed about something, which confused me. He was just yelling and waving his hands like I had done something to him. He kept yelling,
I'm going to freaking kill you.
Over and over. Then he started coming towards my truck and had a very large knife in his hands, so I unholstered my Glock from my waist, not expecting to use it at all. At first, he was just pacing back and forth near my truck like he was amping himself up to do something. But then he started slamming the knife against the back window where my kids were. I yelled over and over to stop, or I'd shoot him, but he didn't seem to care. He just kept stabbing the window. As soon as he cracked the glass with the knife, I unloaded 3 rounds into him, and he was down pretty quickly. He was dead on arrival when the police got there. I'm haunted most by my kids having to experience the feeling of knowing some random man was trying to kill them without reason. Turns out he was loaded up on meth and some strong narcotics and just freaked out. Experience 7. During an uneventful evening, I got slashed badly in the belly by one of 2 guys trying to jump me. I was 20 kilograms lighter, at 65 kilograms, 15 years younger, and didn't know any better. That was the first time I experienced having my consciousness fade in and out, mostly due to blood loss. I was shouting at the top of my lungs while trying to fight them off. Adrenaline kicked in early, so I could barely feel the pain, but the sensation of something slowly gushing out of somewhere it shouldn't have terrified me. I only managed to turn the tide by taking the knife from the one that had it by catching it through my right palm while guarding, then proceeded to stab him repeatedly in the face with it. The other perpetrator made a run for it as 2 guys walking by noticed us and decided to rush in to help. I was crying at this point, thinking I'd died that night. I didn't fall into a coma, but I was out for 3 whole days as soon as I felt that I was on a stretcher. Woke up with a lot of stitches and concerned faces. Everything hurt and I had heavy bruising all around my noodle arms. That was also when I found out that police were at least able to catch the other guy since he's been a repeat offender. With him being thrown straight into jail, I couldn't care less what happened to him from then on, even less for the guy I just killed. It stays with me still because I had body dysmorphia at the time and having those injuries made it worse. I borrowed money from a friend to get my belly lasered, and while it did mentally help for a bit, it partly made it worse. Thankfully, I've grown out of it for many years now with lots of help, but I still think of that night every now and then. I've learned how to walk in an intimidating but confident manner ever since. Experience 8. About 15 years ago, I stopped by a small mom-and-pop grocery store in a very small town in which I lived. Put a few things on the counter, asked for a pack of smokes, and broke $50. As I exited the store, I sensed someone behind me and held the door open behind me. I was walking down the sidewalk a few steps from the door when someone pushed me from behind. I turned around to see a man with a .357 in my face. He said, "Give me the money." As I was getting it out of my pocket, he said, "Hurry up or die," and I heard the click of the hammer being pulled back to the ready-to-fire position. There was no time to formulate a game plan. My right arm came up and my hand pushed up on the underside of the barrel to push it out of my face. I have no idea what I would have done next. I didn't have to worry about it. The robber's finger was on the trigger when I pushed the gun away. The gun fired and the bullet hit him in the forehead to one side. As he went down, I remember the hair attached to the top of his head hitting the tin on the side of the building and just sliding down. I just backed up a few steps and just froze. As it turned out, he had put his grocery items on the counter without paying for them and followed me outside to rob me. I found out later that he had 4 times the amount of money in his pocket than the groceries would have cost him. Of course, I went to jail for the night but was released the next afternoon on a signature bond. There were 4 witnesses outside the store and lifelong residents of the area. Didn't take long for the detectives to do their interviews. My story, as well as the witnesses' stories, who were interviewed separately, were all practically identical. Almost a month later, I appeared on my court date, prepared to represent myself or ask for a court-appointed lawyer. The witnesses were there for support, as well as a state attorney, the detectives, and a few other Sudantai people. Have no idea who they were. This hearing was held in the closed judge's chambers. Long story short, it was recommended that the case be ruled self-defense and all charges be dropped. The judge said the court would recess for 1 hour, and he asked me if I had anything to say to aid in my defense. I struggled to find some words, and when I did, I simply told the judge that I did not kill that man. His wrongful decision to rob me instead of spending his own money is what killed him. That is why my plea will stand as not guilty if these proceedings continue. The case was dismissed. I didn't lose any sleep over the robber. I wish it never happened. But the only thing that still haunts me is the hair sliding down the side of the store building. Experience 9. That my husband could not pull the trigger. When his heart disease worsened, his physical abilities lessened. He swore to always protect me. When home invaders struck, I grabbed his gun and shot one standing in the bedroom doorway. 2 to the chest, as my husband taught me. The others managed to escape but were caught later on. My husband passed away a few weeks later. Experience 10. Nothing at all. I am not psycho. I just have a healthy respect for my life and the lives of those I love, and a healthy disrespect for those who might harm myself or those that I love. When I was much younger, I lived in a kind of crappy apartment complex. I had a 12G shotgun riot gun. Think like Sarah Connor's in T2. Pistol grip and shortened barrel. I was always under my bed. It was part of a sectional, so there was just enough room to slide the gun under there. My roommate had just moved out a few days before, but I let him keep his truck in our covered parking spot. A few days before, he was a pizza delivery guy. He had been delivering to an apartment complex right by ours, and he told the guy no. The guy threatened him, so he put the pizza down and kicked the crap out of the punk. Punk was stoned, according to roommate. Well, it turned out the punk was a gangbanger and told some crap stains new to the gang to kill him. It took a few days, and they realized his truck was in the complex next door. It was distinctive. So, I got home from working overnight. I had class in a few hours and had just laid down. Suddenly someone kicks in my door. I grab the shotgun and open my bedroom door. 3 dickheads are coming into my apartment with handguns. So, I shoot. The first blast kills the one in front, the second kills one of the others and badly wounds the third. He turns and heads down the stairs. Now, 2 cops lived next door. They were getting ready for work and heard my door being kicked in. By the time they were on our shared landing, I had shot both times. They saw the third guy bloody and screwed up, heading down the stairs. They yelled at him to drop his gun. He turned, raising his gun up, and they shot him, once each. I was questioned, but not detained. They took my shotgun, but it was later returned to me. The neighbors later told me that all 3 were wanted for armed robberies in which 2 clerks were shot, one died, and the other was in serious condition. He lived, but not a good life due to his injuries. 2, maybe all 3, this is 40-some years ago, were wanted for R-wording a 15-year-old girl. They were all carrying stolen handguns that had been used in several violent crimes where the guns had been fired and a bullet was recovered. They did not think these 3 did all of those crimes. But they were massive poop stains. I have never lost a moment of peace for this. They were violent animals. Violent animals need to be put down. They were willing to kill my ex-roommate because a gangbanger higher-up lost a crappy fight over a pizza. These guys were pieces of crap. I do not think of the crap I have had either. If it is self-defense, and you warrant that lethal force should be a viable tactic, then it better by God be warranted. It should be your last resort. Had they not had guns, I would have held them until the neighbors came over. Or held them and called the cops. Had they never come to my apartment, I would have done nothing. But they did. And they came to kill. What would you have done? Experience 11. This is one of the most personal stories, and very specific. Anyone who was there will certainly know who I am. But I think sharing the story for anyone who might gain some insight and better understand death and killing is worth the risk to anonymity. There were more people I killed during OIF/OEF than I wanted to, and not necessarily all directly self-defense. None were out of cruelty or malice, and there's plenty of philosophical discussion to have about killing in war, but many people have stories about the banality of death in war. This story is, hopefully, more uniquely haunting. It wasn't like the others who I fought and killed. Those were people who, at least at the time, I could reasonably believe were going to kill me or others for ideological reasons. That violence felt more easily acceptable because of the immediate risks and predictable reduction of risk to the life of soldiers and civilians in the area. It was reasonable, it was war. But there was one instance that felt very different for many complex reasons. He was a prisoner who had an obvious mental health disorder with delusional qualities. I don't know the full story, but I can't imagine he entered the conflict of his own will and of sound mind. While war is hard, and I know it has not been the case for far too many, I believe we did our best where I was to be humane and fair in our treatment of prisoners who were usually in our custody for hours or days. No matter how well that goal of humane treatment is achieved, there's an enormous and legitimate emotional hardship in being a prisoner under any circumstances, but especially in remote places and relying on the ethical standards of people trying to kill you and your friends a few hours before. We had a long walk back to our outpost and a hard time communicating during the processing and placement in a makeshift holding room in the middle of rural Afghanistan, far from any major base with systems or personnel equipped for detainee operations. It became increasingly apparent this young man had some serious delusional disorder. I spoke their language and talked to another prisoner who said the disturbed man was the crazy goat and the world where he lives isn't here. After a few hours, the behavior escalated as he started slapping and punching himself and talking about demons in the walls in a rambling effect familiar to anyone who's seen someone in an acute state of delusional psychosis, intermittently bursting out with short screams followed by a sudden shift to speaking in the previous tone as if he hadn't screamed. As that developed, we determined it was unsafe to keep him in a room with a group. I tried to talk to him and explain that we were going to take him to another room and that we wanted to keep everyone safe. He grabbed a nearby stool and lunged at me. Amazingly, and thankfully, none of the other half-dozen prisoners took advantage of the moment to attack others, but he managed to catch my face with the stool. Time dilated and fractions of seconds were stretched out like an overblown balloon at the moment before it popped. I leapt back as he hit my face, and he followed momentum forward and knocked over the other soldier trying to escort him to the other room. Standing over him, the man started to swing down at the soldier's face with the stool once and then went to grab the rifle, wrapped around the soldier on a sling. It would have been nearly impossible to grab and operate properly, but too easy to carelessly shoot and kill any one of the men in that room. The soldier shot him twice in the gut. He continued to yank at the rifle. I stepped to get an angle and shot him in the head. The gravity washed over me as time contracted back and collapsed into a sequence of frames, shouting to order the other detainees against the walls and to sit on their hands, standing by the other soldier as he stood up. A series of our squad and higher leadership rushing in, giving a situational report that I didn't consciously form or speak, and getting out of the room as soon as someone could take my place. A moment of silent letdown, a cigarette, and then briefing my commander. Another cigarette, then the strangest sleep I've ever known, much needed after 36 hours of patrol and subsequent events, but full of abstract dreams. The next day was another patrol, and my mind stashed the memory away for another 11 months until I was stateside and in therapy. I've lived many years and had many things that shaped the way I see the world. Some have been profoundly tragic, including this one, but there have been only a handful of other moments that were anywhere close to the experiential and moral challenge of that day. While haunting is a word I wouldn't normally choose, and I've had plenty of time, therapy, and opportunities to do unambiguous good in the world, the tragic emotional and philosophical details from this experience will forever remain a part of me.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.